Good afternoon and welcome, friends, to another beehiiv growth webinar. We run these webinars pretty regularly in order to help our community really learn more about the newsletter production process, how to hack growth, how to join, or how to build their followings in a sustainable way, in a way that meets all the best practices and is repeatable, scalable, all those sorts of things. And so I'm excited to have you here today to cover some of those things. Here is the agenda for what I'm going to be covering in the next 50 minutes or so. We're going to cover the groundwork, things that are kind of the non-negotiables that you must have in place before you start building your newsletter. Some ways to get some quick wins on social media through promoting yourself. Viral loops for growth, so tips and tricks that you can implement with your newsletter production process that's going to boost and get you growing, and basically that growth leading to more growth, kind of like a perpetual motion machine. You spin the flywheel and it just kind of starts to spin faster and faster rather than slowing down. Referral program best practices. This is one of our key features that beehiiv has that we had since day one when we launched more than 3 years ago. The referral program is a really, really powerful way to get your evangelists and your users to be sharing your content. Partnerships and collaborations. We had a webinar probably about a month back with Brian Harris from growthtools.com where he talks about borrowing other people's audience. BOP is like the acronym there. It's a fun sound to say, but borrowing other people's audiences is a great way to just kind of stand on the shoulders of other people to be able to boost your growth and boost your following. We will touch on ads and paid methods, though we typically go much deeper in dedicated ads and paid webinars. We have those regularly with different agency partners and different topics. There's just so much to cover with paid that it'd be hard to go over in a setting that's just an hour long. And then lastly, we'll cover some quick ways that you can optimize your sign-up experience for maximizing conversions as well as maximizing engagement after the conversion itself. We'll end with a Q&A. We'll see how we can do this best with working with the folks that are on YouTube right now. But we'll post the link. Tony has the link here to our Q&A form. So if you can see it in the chat, he'll drop it in just a moment. We can basically get the get the questions from the audience and answer those as we go. Water, super important for webinars. A little underrated. Not many people know that. Super important for keeping the vocal cords limber. So we got the pre-call survey / Q&A stuff. I'm sorry, this is the Q&A. We used to do like a little bit more of like a survey, but I got to update that. Where am I going? Don't show this next time. Okay, I want to go back though. There we go. We'll save all the questions to the end. I try to save those to the end with the Q&A form so that we're not interrupting the flow, so I can get on a roll and really serve you guys best. And then anything that we reference in terms of resources, in terms of the deck that I'm sure you're seeing right now, will be shared in the coming days. We have a portion of our blog where we host all of these webinars. So if you want to go back and view some of the past ones, I'm sure Tony will be as kind as to post a link to the archive of all of our past webinars as well. You can see all kinds of different topics if you don't want to wait for the ones that are coming up in the future. Although the ones that are ongoing obviously have new information as we build new features, as new tactics come into play, as TikTok gets banned, etc. So moving to the first step. Laying the groundwork for success. Now, this is the kind of, again, I said, you kind of described this as a non-negotiable. It's super important that when you get started, before you start growing, before you start investing in your newsletter with, paid media, before you invest in the domain even, before you really kind of, really get started in earnest, it's critical that you find your niche and you really understand who your audience is. So those kind of go together, but they're definitely distinct. So finding your niche is understanding, like, Brian here in the chat was saying that his niche is basically news for people who are taking care of their parents and trying to keep their marriage together. So people who are under these very stressful, conditions, and it's a very, very niche audience. And that way, I could imagine, I told him it was a very, very good niche because if you are getting that specific about your subscribers, you can really know exactly the challenges they're going through. You know how to speak to them. Basically, you can deduce a lot from them, which helps you really, really focus your content, understand how to do marketing to those users and what's going to resonate with them. And so the niche is, and the audience again is like very, very intertwined. But once you have that niche, now you can really imagine who is your audience. These are going to be parents. These are going to be married people. Those types of demographics tend to, be a little bit older, maybe late 20s, early 30s. They're going to be maybe a little bit more suburban or skew suburban, and it basically kind of gives you an idea, like, what are their daily challenges? What does their day look like? What do they go through each day that is going to lead to stress in their life, and how can you help alleviate that stress by providing whatever content you're providing? So just a real life example. And yeah, so find your niche. Generally we see that niches are too broad. That's like one pitfall. You really, really want to, the example I also use aside from the one here in the chat is like my girlfriend, due to like her dietary needs, has a very specific diet. She's pescatarian, gluten-free, and dairy-free. And I can't tell you how many times we've, been out or just randomly met people who kind of have the same dietary restrictions. And it's just like, they immediately mesh, they immediately vibe, because the shared experience of having such a restrictive diet is, presents its own challenges. And so if you were creating a newsletter, around, health and food, just saying I'm going to write about health and food is like way too broad, because, people have different ideas of what health means in terms of nutrition. You have, carnivore, you have keto, which is like completely at odds with things like veganism and vegetarianism, pescatarianism, et cetera. And so, you can't just go and say, I'm going to write about health or nutrition or food. If you wanted to do that, you should pick a niche. And even saying I'm going to write about vegetarians, is like very, very broad, because then you have kind of these, very big subgroups in that area: pescatarian, vegan, vegetarian, etc. So the more you can get down and get very, very focused with that audience, the more you're going to be able to recognize your audience, vibe with them, and resonate when you write your content. That's really the biggest thing. You want your content to resonate so that they feel like that you understand them and that you have authority. Because if you can reach them and speak directly to their challenges, it builds a great amount of trust. They say, if you understand what I'm going through, then what else do you have to say that might be helpful to me? And it immediately builds that trust and that authority. So that's the first thing. It also then will lead to how you position the voice, the brand, all of these things that come around your audience. So it's like, if you were, for example, I don't know Brian's, I haven't seen his newsletter, but I imagine that like for this kind of topic, there would be some sort of, tones of voice in the writing that if he took those approaches, it might be, kind of off-putting or inappropriate, because it's a very serious topic. I could be wrong about that. It could be, the opposite, where these people need some levity in their life. And so it's done from a comedic or, a kind of a lighter tone. But the point is, like, the approach that you would take with the tone and voice of your brand is going to be very, very dependent on that audience. The second step is, once you have that audience in mind, your audience, your niche, you need to start publishing consistently. It doesn't really matter necessarily whether you have those users kind of in the pipeline already and that you're getting growth organically before you start publishing consistently. If you start publishing consistently, what follows on is the growth. That's what, that's really how you're going to, do much better in terms of that growth. People are going to get used to starting to see you posting content on social, as we'll get into. You build that habit so that it's, consistent. The key to building a following is that people expect and are desiring the content that you're putting out. And so, when somebody discovers your newsletter, if they can go and they can see you have an archive that is, multiple posts deep, one, that builds authority and trust. It means that you're not just kind of this fly by night, just started type thing. Two, it gives them something to do. So like if they really love an article that they discovered and they want to go deeper, it allows them to go deeper and engage further, which increases the chance that they're going to subscribe. Also builds that, mind share and authority that you have in their kind of consciousness. And so, really, really recommend publishing consistently. But just in terms of that publishing consistently, we recommend setting a habit, sticking to it, holding yourself accountable. And then one of the tips that I recommend is basically like getting a bit of an archive before you go public. So before you start to share with the world like what it is that you've built in terms of, launching your newsletter, build out an archive of like 10 posts. Kind of build that habit for yourself, build in private for yourself, so that you're not, basically a lot of times people will burn out because it's like they put all this work and planning into launching the newsletter. and then they, publish their first edition, and they get a lot of feedback. They see everybody, praising it. They go, oh, that's super, super cool. And you get that big dopamine rush that, you get from doing something and getting praise and recognition. And then it makes it a little bit more difficult to then go back and like do that work again necessarily. And so, it's not great for building the habit. And what I mean is, so you need to be writing for yourself, and the public will then see that when you do launch. And so if you can get that habit in over the course of, if you're doing once a week, you can either just front load everything kind of at the very beginning, or maybe you just start a habit where you publish for 10 weeks, 2.5 months. And then at the end of that 2.5 months, that's when you launch. And you can use some of that process in the in-between time to collect feedback, to send some articles to your audience that you may be targeting, to get feedback and understand how how you're being received. So this is now leads to the last thing, is collecting feedback from subscribers. This is an incredibly important part, and it's important that you not just focus on all subscribers, but it's really the subscribers that you have identified as being the ones that you are trying to attract. And what I mean by that is, if you are Brian and you're trying to attract these parents who are trying to keep the marriage together and take care of their, if they're trying to take care of their kids, their parents, and their marriage, you don't want to necessarily be optimizing feedback around young single people who have no kids and whose parents are in good health. If you start optimizing your content around their feedback, you're going to start writing content that is not for your audience. And so, that's one of the things. It's, if you listen to this, it's a lot of the feedback is very similar to launching a startup. It's like understanding who your audience is, talking to the right people, incredibly important. All of this is in search of, kind of similarly using a startup term, all of this is in search of what we refer to as content market fit, which is a very, very similar principle as product market fit. It's just slightly different in that you don't have necessarily a physical product or a service, but you actually have your newsletter, which in some way itself could be considered a product or service. So you can use product market fit, you can use content market fit. The principle is the same. You want to find that combination, that kind of magic combination that is going to get people engaged, resonate. And what you'll notice is that when you hit that, you will start to see people sharing your newsletter organically. It'll start to grow, whether it's you're sharing on social and it's just kind of taking off, people are resharing it, people are sending it to folks. But you will see that organic growth as a leading indicator of what is to come. And that's when you really know that it's time to get into growth mode. So the key is, if you're not at this point, the only priority, not monetizing, not, scaling. If you're early in your process, this is your only job, is to basically find that product market fit, content market fit before you do anything else here. So that's why I spend the most time of the presentation on the groundwork, because it's incredibly important. We have a question here. What's the advice for identifying your best subscribers? So one would be, we recommend setting up a survey when users subscribe, so you can identify key attributes of who you're trying to reach. And so when they subscribe, you can ask them questions. It's like, if you're Brian with his, you can say, are you a parent? Yes or no? Are you married? What is your relationship status? Single, married, whatever. And you can actually, there's two approaches. One, some people who, for example, build local newsletters may ask where you live, and if you don't live in the place that they're serving their local newsletter, they may actually unsubscribe you, and you could do something similar. The other approach would be, even if you're not unsubscribing those folks who don't meet your audience, you wouldn't necessarily be then seeking feedback. So it's a couple different ways to seek feedback. One, through our surveys and forms tools, but also through things like where you can basically ask users at the end of a post, like, what did you think of today's edition? And so you'll get a baseline of like people saying, yeah, it was great, it was fine, it was bad. And so you can cross-reference basically if somebody says it was bad and you go and you look at and you can see, okay, this user is like not in my target audience, you can really safely ignore that feedback. Whereas if somebody says, oh yeah, this was spot on and great, and they're, married, they have kids, they have aging parents, in Brian's case, you would know that you've hit the mark and you're doing something right. So there we go. Moving forward, social media quick wins. So kind of along the lines, the reason why we spend so much time on the groundwork is because most of these will call back to those groundwork things. So the first thing is really understanding where your audience spends their attention. This is like the first and the last thing you need to do. If you understand nothing else from this slide, it's just understand where your audience is currently spending the currency of their attention. So in today's world, people are on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, X, Blue Sky, even people still on Facebook. There's all these different platforms where people are spending their attention, and you are vying for that attention. You are competing in the marketplace of attention to get eyeballs, to get consciousness looking at your content. And so in order to compete, you need to be able to understand where to focus your limited resources. We all have limited resources for the most part on how we can produce content, how we can produce different pieces of media that are going to be reaching our audience. Even beehiiv, we don't have unlimited resources to just like flood 10 posts a day across every platform. So we prioritize. Even more kind of down to earth, if I was going to build a personal brand, I wouldn't have the time to be across all 6 of these platforms. If I was, for example, to start a personal brand around marketing topics, I'd probably stick to LinkedIn in the beginning, because that's where people who are interested in business and marketing stuff spend their attention. And so that is to say, understand where your audience spends their attention so that you can really focus your resources and understand like how best to engage with them. It's much better to, yeah, cool. I'm glad this wasn't one of the other bullet points. I have a habit of jumping around. It's much better to, basically focus all of your resources and attention onto one channel in the beginning than it is to split the attention across 6 different channels. I know that repurposing content is like super, super popular these days, and it's a great piece of advice. But in the beginning, until you've really reached kind of those growth legs, you really need to be focused on like one channel and really cracking the code on that one channel. Not to say that you shouldn't repost other places, but the truth is even the people who are growing and scaling will really limit their focus to channels where they really understand how users interact with content, how users are, engaging with new content formats, rather than just spray and pray across 10 different places. Next, consistently posting. So almost all of the algorithms, if not all of them, prioritize and reward people who post constantly, or not constantly, but consistently. There's a challenge that some people do on LinkedIn where it's like, posting once a day for 100 days. And I've yet to see anybody who has done this who hasn't really transformed their following. By doing something just as simple as making a post every day, it forces you to kind of be in that mind space every single day, and really think about how your content is reaching folks, and you will get better at social media. So I would say if you feel like you're bad at social media now, pick a channel and commit to yourself. You're going to post a piece of content every single day. You will naturally learn as you try to, maybe first couple of days is fine. You're thinking of a bunch of things. After a couple of days, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm not necessarily sure what to write about or think about. I'm gonna have to go back and actually really think about this. And so you'll start to do the investigation, and you'll naturally understand and start to see what type of content resonates with your audience, what type of content gets more reach, what type of content maybe doesn't work as well. But, on top of all that, if you reach the end of 100 days, that process of analyzing and understanding what works for your audience and the consistency is going to pay huge dividends. And that social media feed then can become a huge, huge asset to, when you're posting. You publish your newsletter, you share aspects of it, snippets from it on social. You're going to get more reach, and that's going to be very, very helpful. And you're going to have built and curated an audience that is relevant to your content. Kind of along the lines of like not necessarily spray and praying. Native content formats are super important. So understanding that when you go to a social network, if you're posting on TikTok, you may actually not even want to post the exact same content on Twitter, on Instagram Reels. There are differences between the people who spend time on each of those platforms. Generally, Instagram Reels is a little bit older. TikTok skews a little bit younger. There's different ways in which the algorithms weigh different engagement signals. And so, but certainly if you're posting on one platform like TikTok, you wouldn't necessarily post that same exact content on something like X or Blue Sky. It just is the way that those platforms work. The rewards and the signals that, that video content generates is going to be different on TikTok compared to Blue Sky, for example. And so you want to make sure that when you choose a place to focus or to operate, you are working within the kind of recommended frameworks of each platform. Built-in, we actually already have that. We've had that now since, I don't know, it's been at least probably a year now. So I think what you mean is, so in the chat, Vilton's asking, are you planning on to build a built-in tool to add UTM parameters automatically to post links? We've had that for a long time. If you, on the website of things, if you publish a post, any link on the website is going to automatically have UTM parameters associated with it. So I think that's what's being asked there. Leverage popular trends. This is, more or less, I'd say this is, most people kind of get this, but, looking to see, in the popular tab, of like what's trending can be really, really helpful for understanding like what is grabbing the public attention now, and either remixing certain trends or coming up with content that, potentially plays on that can be, really valuable, because one, it's going to get promoted in people's feeds more, and it's just going to be relevant to users as they see this similar content across the web. Specific to newsletter publishers like us, we want to make sure that we are including calls to action, whether that's, click the link in my bio. If we're able to add a link to a post or in the feed, we always want to have some sort of call to action. It doesn't have to be to subscribe to the newsletter. It can be to go download some sort of lead magnet. It can just be to subscribe, but you always want to have some sort of call to action, so that at the end of the video, when somebody's spent their time and attention engaging with your content, they have a next step if they want to take it. The worst thing is that if you leave a user who's engaged, vibing with what you're putting down, and then you just kind of leave them hanging with no next step, it's a wasted opportunity. Lastly, one of the more popular ways to kind of really initiate kind of like it's more like a playbook, but one of the tried and true kind of methods here is like the contests and giveaways method. Super, super easy to do for newsletter publishers. You can say, I'm going to give away, you can do physical products. If you're a local newsletter, one of the things we talk about is like giving away, maybe like a local experience. If you're, a business newsletter, or, if you're Brian's newsletter, you could give away like a guide or something, something that can help users, a lead magnet of some sort. But the idea basically being, say, hey, like this, share this, and I'm going to send you and comment or something like that. There's different approaches depending on your goals, but, like, share, comment, whatever, and I'm going to send you this reward. I'm going to send you a giveaway, or I'm going to enter you in to win something. It can be really, really powerful. Obviously with social, for newsletters, you may want to say you're going to have to be a subscriber to the newsletter in order to win as well. So you have to subscribe to the newsletter, share this post, send it to a friend, etc. Tag a friend can be really useful. But basically incentivizing users to kind of take a minute of their time to try to win something is a really, really powerful way to jumpstart some of the stuff you're doing. So you spend a bunch of time there. Moving on, implementing viral growth loops. So viral loop is something where when I kind of described it at the beginning, but you set in place, and when a user goes through the kind of initial process, their actions are going to generate basically more of those actions. So if you have somebody who goes through your loop once, and that then generates 2 people coming back to your newsletter, and then those 2 people go through the loop and they both invite, or bring 2 people in, then that one user has generated, ostensibly 6 additional users. So 1 user, 2, and then 4. So, that is a flywheel, as they say, that can basically scale up. So how do we do this? The key for newsletters is around designing effective user journeys. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this, but it's more of a mindset of how can I basically encourage a user as they engage with my newsletter to take specific actions that will be additive or creative to the, newsletter, growth experience. And so, a couple of the ways here: incentivizing sharing, easy, having ways to share easily, and collecting user-generated content. And so going through each of these, I'll go through a couple actually, kind of real life examples. But one of the ones that we did when we did this the first time, Matt McGarry was a guest, talked about how when they have one of these polls that collects user satisfaction, and when a user says that they are, they liked whatever the post was, so they respond and say, yes, this was a great post. That kicks off an automation that sends them a message saying, hey, saw that you loved this latest edition. It would be great if you wanted to leave a review, leave a testimonial, film a testimonial, share a social post. And essentially he takes then those social posts that are created from these users who are now evangelists and reposts them, uses them in landing pages, uses them in ads, which then gets more users who are very similar and aligned with the persona of those best users. But, in terms of incentivizing sharing, another way to do that would be through the referral programs. So referral program, the built-in, it's like literally a viral loop in itself. You incentivize a user to share the newsletter based on the rewards that you want to give them. You set up milestones. So, maybe 1 subscriber, 3, 5, 10, whatever. It can be anything you want. But you're literally incentivizing, if you share this newsletter and you get me more subscribers, I'm going to give you this sort of reward. We have built-in mechanisms with beehiiv, all of the easy share links on all of your posts and all of your emails. You don't have to include them, but we certainly encourage them. And then basically those built-in things like a referral program, And I feel like I'm missing one, but if I remember it, I'll come back to it. So speaking of referral program best practices, want to double click on that specific, growth loop. But, here's an example from Tyler's, our CEO's publication, Big Desk Energy. He goes through and basically offers these rewards. Cool. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of the questions that we've gotten. Amazing. So best practices, you can see here the screenshot from his email, his newsletter called Big Desk Energy. He has a bunch of different rewards here. So this first one is 25% off anything in the store. He also has rewards that go up, that scale from just the 25% off. I think probably some of these gifts are within those milestones. But essentially, designed and built kind of the product for this feature at Morning Brew before starting beehiiv. And so it was one of the most powerful growth loops that they implemented at Morning Brew. And so bringing it to beehiiv was one of our ways that we were able to differentiate ourselves in the very, very beginning, because it can be very, very powerful. The key here is designing the program in a way that you're going to be providing real, tangible, desirable rewards to your users. There's no one size fits all. If you look at this one and try to reverse engineer it and do it exactly the way that Tyler has here, it's not going to work. You have to understand who, again, understanding your audience. You have to understand who your audience is and what drives them, what's going to get them to click, what's going to get one person to click and share is not going to be the same, for this newsletter as it is for, a Morning Brew type newsletter. Second step, if you're not using beehiiv, these presentations are meant to be valuable for anyone. So although beehiiv kind of handles all of these really, really smoothly and seamlessly, the presentation itself is meant to be applicable to anyone, agnostic of whether you choose to use beehiiv. Obviously, we hope that you do, and it makes your life way easier if you do. But making sure that the sign up process and the tracking process is super, super simple. It can be very challenging if you have something like, if you're not on beehiiv and you have something where a user has to enter a code in order to get credit, or I don't know, if there's some other way to track with our process. Every subscriber that signs up to your newsletter has a unique code, and they just copy that and share that with whoever they want. Everything gets tracked in a leaderboard automatically. I can actually share some of what this looks like in the back end. I know we're not super short on time, or long on time, but I can just show you here. So I have my newsletter for Vacation Voyeur. It's like a luxury vacation newsletter. Unfortunately, I don't have tons of subscribers, but you can see what it looks like here. I've one subscriber with referrals. I think that's actually myself. Yeah, but I have five referrals, 5 users referred. You can see these different rewards that I have. So 1 referral gets somebody a year of the premium access. 3 referrals get them a sticker. 10 referrals gets them a hat, and 20 referrals gets them a tote bag. So from here, I'd be able to see if I had other users who were referring this newsletter, which is more or less a test newsletter, how these different experiences break down. So coming back here, we handle the tracking and reporting, but it's important to make sure you can see who your best users are. We actually have different mechanisms in beehiiv where you can actually kick off automations when a user refers someone. So obviously we have the email that they receive when they reach a milestone, but you could have an entire series around somebody who they hit their first milestone. That they're engaged in sharing your program. You could provide them with additional resources. You could continue to encourage them with a slow drip of emails of you're super close to your next reward, just share with 2 more people, etc. But there's a lot of ways you can basically not just track the program, but take action based on it. And then, that kind of aligns with promoting the program. But again, if you've gotten the social media part down, you understand your audience, you're building that following, promoting the program to your audience, both through the newsletter and through your socials is a no-brainer and no problem. Cool. Next loop is leveraging partners and collaboration. So there's a bunch of different ways that we facilitate this through beehiiv. This can take a ton of different forms, but essentially leveraging partnerships and collaborating with other users, can be one of the most cost-effective and mutually beneficial tactics there are for growth. And so the key here is to find partners and other newsletters that you want to work with that really align with your audience, first and foremost, and 2 are not directly in competition. And so a lot of times we see, for example, if you are running a finance newsletter and somebody has a crypto newsletter and there's an AI newsletter, each of these things, kind of don't really overlap. They're all in the same kind of tech finance space, but none of them necessarily overlap with the content. So they're not in direct competition, but that audience may overlap quite a bit. And so, first up, identifying potential newsletters that you might want to partner with. And then next is just like understanding like how you can frame a pitch. So a lot of times these take form by reaching out to that potential partner saying, hey, I run this newsletter. I'd love to collaborate, or I'd love to share your newsletter with my audience. Curious if you would, mind sharing me back, or like what I would need to do to have a partnership. Generally, the best relationships are going to be ones where you're kind of similar size. But certainly there's opportunities if you shoot your shot where somebody who's much bigger may work with you to partner, especially generally those are based on the quality of your content. If they can read your newsletter and say, wow, this is like really, really primo content, my audience is going to love this, you can kind of overcome that differential of size, and so the ways you can execute this are through things like recommendations built into beehiiv. So you can, basically you just come into here. If they're on beehiiv, under our growth settings, under recommendations, you can basically add them through this interface. This is how you can also find other newsletters that you might want to promote. But through this interface for recommendations is one. Through boosts, our marketplace for growing, or monetizing, you can go to boosts and you can say, okay, cool. I guess if you wanted to grow, you can do both sides here. So if you explore offers, you can see ones that are willing to pay you to share. And if you want to find folks that will share you for a paid fee, you can use the other side of the marketplace where you're making the offer and other folks are taking you up on that offer. The third way would be through magic links. So if you're working with someone who's not on beehiiv, you can come in here and we have, I think, 14 different platforms that we're compatible with. But for example, if you're, reach out to a newsletter that's on MailChimp, you can negotiate that collaboration. You can give them this link, and basically in MailChimp, this is going to be replaced with the user's email when it gets sent to that user. So all they have to do is click the link and it's going to automatically subscribe them to your newsletter. You can even add in these different things. So it could be like MailChimp, these are UTM parameters. So somebody was talking about this earlier. So you could add these things, test and default. Oh, and this is the redirect. So you can say like where you want them to be sent after they subscribe. And so essentially you create this URL with these advanced features. And so this is going to be the link that you share. You can collaborate with virtually any newsletter out there. That's how we chose these platforms, except for Substack, because Substack doesn't allow custom fields or an API. So that is that. Once you kind of are going through this process, there's other ways aside from just these like kind of, quid pro quo, like, tit for tat type recommendations. One of the other ones is joint content creation. So you could have like a guest writer. So again, in that example where you may be talking about finance, crypto, and AI, you may want to say, hey, like, would you like to write a section in my newsletter about AI to these finance people? If the audience alignment is great, they could basically, you could invite someone to write that. At the end of their little section, you could say, hey, and if this was useful, go ahead and subscribe to their newsletter. Basically have a little, almost like an ad, but it's like a guest post. You could also have them do an entire edition. We're going to say, hey, this newsletter is a little bit different than this newsletter post is a little bit different than the typical ones. It's actually written by this person who is working at the intersection of, for example, finance and crypto. They, had some really interesting things to say. Thought you'd be interested in learning how these things overlap. Okay. Any talk about growth would be remiss without jumping in talking about, sorry, just looking at the questions here. Cool. Any conversation about growth would be remiss without talking about ads. Again, I'm not going to go super deep here because one, we do have about 20 minutes left, I think, but we're not super long on time. But there's also just like so much to be talked about here that, it would not be really possible to cover everything, even like with an hour. Generally, we have webinars that are specifically for this topic that last about an hour. So different types of methods, paid social media ads, really, really successful, valuable way to reach new users. So you can see here an ad from Creator Spotlight. We have, the kind of hook. So what creators with 10 to 100,000 followers don't want you to know, or know that you don't. So this is saying, okay, 10 to 100,000 followers, this is trying to target people who are in this range. So if you do have 10 to 100,000 followers, you're like, okay, cool, that's me. And then what do they know that I don't? That creates a lot of desire and a lot of kind of FOMO of like, what am I missing that maybe they know that I don't? And if you have less than this number, also would be kind of compelling because you're like, I want to know, how do I reach those levels? So when they click this is going to take them to the actual, I think this is for our Creator Almanac. It also may just be for the newsletter itself. Oh, join Creator Spotlight. Yeah, this is just for the Creator Spotlight one. But anyway, this is targeting folks on Facebook specifically in this ad format, who may be of this profile that we want to subscribe to Creator Spotlight. Second, Google Ads is one that I think that a lot of creators sleep on. It can be tough if you don't have experience with Google Ads to really crack this code in a cost-efficient way, but it can be very, very powerful in that Google Ads, Google search ads specifically, you have a very clear idea of what users are searching. When somebody with Google search ads, you're able to divine the exact search that a user is putting into the search engine. And then there's an auction to show whether you show up or not. So if somebody is looking for something like you're starting a travel newsletter, somebody's searching best travel newsletters, best luxury travel newsletters, that could be a very, very lucrative, a very, very lucrative keyword if somebody's looking for luxury travel experiences for, my newsletter about exclusive ultra luxe boutique hotels, private getaways, and bespoke adventures. I would know that this person has a very, very specific interest and focus on what I offer, and I can provide them with that. But Google also has a ton of other tools. There's things like smart targeting where they can, once you feed them some data around subscriptions and who's subscribing, they can go out and find people who may not be necessarily searching for these things, but could still be in market. There's a lot of really, really cool things that you can unlock with Google. Native advertising. So this is going to be more like something like you can buy space in Forbes or another newsletter where there's an article that you may publish that looks like a normal kind of post or it looks like a normal blog post, but actually the focus of that is driving people to your newsletter. I don't have an example right here, but basically native advertising is meant to kind of look native, and it's how we take our approach to ads. So our ad network is meant to be much more native than like an example of like a banner ad or something like that, where people can immediately recognize that this is an ad. They're meant to look a little bit more engaging, a little bit more natural. Paid sponsorship. So this is along the lines of something like a Boosts, or even just making manual deals of saying, hey, would love to sponsor your newsletter. We see people in our ad network do this from time to time, but also you can do it through kind of more at scale through Boosts. But you can sponsor the newsletter. Say, hey, I want to be the sponsor, and if somebody clicks on the ad, they get taken to my newsletter. The big thing for all of these things, the common thread, is that the content itself is really what's key to reaching your audience. So whether you're creating social ads, and this is the content here, whether you're creating social ads, whether you're creating that native content, whether you're even a search ad, which is just kind of a snippet of text, the content and the copy that you're writing is absolutely critical to identifying your audience and engaging with them. So before I go to the next slide, cool. We even got some collaborative, we got some people swap recommendations in the chat. Chat is popping off. I love that. Yeah, I think in today's world, the lines are blurring. Thank you, Tony. The question was, how do you think about promoting on social media when you have a brand that is more of a B2B brand versus B2C? And my answer there is that I think in today's world, the line is blurring more and more. What people are starting to realize is that, the folks who make buying decisions are just regular people. So when they're browsing social media very similarly to the way the rest of us do. And so what they want is content that connects with them, that engages and resonates with them. And so the key there is to really just create good content that is going to grab attention. It's not necessarily as important to be selling your product to them through kind of the organic social. It's, again, more grabbing that attention. And that's something I think that a lot of B2B marketers are picking up on. But if you follow folks like Daniel Burke on LinkedIn, he's got great content. It's actually mostly like 90% nonsense, sprinkled with some like running influencer type posts. But that is to say, even though it's kind of nonsense, it's very funny and engaging. And so you see him as a fixture, and like maybe once every 5 or 6 posts, he'll drop something about beehiiv in there. And so if you're following him, you're truly following because his content is funny and engaging. But then you're also getting exposed to the beehiiv brand, and which is valuable and good for him because he's running some sales over there. So when people come in and they see his content, they then reach out to him and be like, hey, I'm interested in hearing about beehiiv. I've been following you for a couple weeks. And so I'm very, very much a B2B motion in that way. Cool. So optimizing sign-up experience. So this is, we have talked a lot about how we're going to source and find our audience, how we're going to activate those people and get them to the site. Now, in this last step, we're going to talk about how you actually take that traffic, take those eyeballs, and move them into your email list with the last about 5-10 minutes we have left. So The first thing here is that analytics and clear analytics is absolutely crucial here. Features built in that help you analyze and understand, what actions users are taking on your site. And so, Tony, perhaps you can drop in. Wait, which cameras? Tony, maybe you can drop in the post around like setting up Facebook tracking and Google Ads tracking, Google Analytics tracking. But basically, we have built-in functionality where we will, when somebody subscribes, fire what's called a data layer event, which is able to tell all of these different tracking analytics, ad platforms that a user took an action. And so the punchline here is that with those tools, you can then kind of break down your audience. You can see who your best subscribers are, who is subscribing, where they're coming from, and then basically double down on those things. You can do some of that within beehiiv itself, but we're a newsletter tool. We're not, the world's leading analytics tool. So we didn't feel like competing with Google Analytics and, this kind of literally number one software for analytics in the world. So we lean on Google Analytics for that. And we integrate with all the other ad platforms as well to give you that data. Second, our approach, which may be changing soon in terms of the, what we provide tools for, but to date, our approach has been, maximize conversion, maximize performance for our users. And so for us, minimal fields, it's unequivocal, minimal fields achieve this. As soon as you start adding fields, it's just a logical thing. If you have one field, if you have a second field, there will be drop off. It's just like, even if you have 100% of people fill out the first field, you have 90% of people fill out the second field that's required, your conversion rate is going to be lower than just if you had one field. So our approach from the beginning has just been to have this one email field for subscribers to maximize performance, and then basically provide the opportunity for users to collect additional information like first name, like the survey data once they subscribe through experiences like our sign up flow. If this is kind of counter to your philosophy, that's totally fine. There's definitely room for, different approaches, and we're building out optionality there. But, with the built-in default kind of beehiiv experiences, we collect email and then, kind of leave it up to collecting that additional information later because it maximizes the kind of throughput of those people joining your newsletter. It's critical, at this point. We talked about how important copy and creative is for ads. Equally as important is your copy and in some ways your creative for your landing pages. So in this case, every great landing page is going to kind of deliver the value proposition front and center. So in this case, Neuron, perfect example, name of the newsletter, what its promise is. Very clear. If you want that, if you want to make AI work for you, you're in the right place. If you don't care about AI, I don't know how you ended up on this page, but this is going to be irrelevant for you. It's very, very clear. Do you want that value? Do you want that benefit, or do you not? And then, of course, the smaller text basically gives a little bit more flavor around what differentiates them, some social proof, and so forth. But copy cannot be understated as you're trying to optimize these experiences, test different versions. You can run one for a week and then run another for a week and see which one works better. You can run ads with specific forms of copy that you may want to test on your landing page. With the websites, there's different tools out there that you could use to deploy to do little A/B testing on the actual pages themselves. We hope to have that functionality within beehiiv before too long. Next, visual appeal, very similar to copy. You want something interesting, memorable, something that's going to give people trust that you are, have something that's worth saying. So in this case, this background, custom graphics, branded, you can see the logo, but then like the elements and motifs of the logo in the background just creates a very polished look, which builds credibility, builds confidence, and is maximizes the likelihood that somebody's going to trust their email with you. Next is like when you actually ask for the subscription. So in this case, we talked at the beginning, do a little callback to social media about like when you ask for that email. Is it, you wouldn't start a post or start a social media post that says, hey, subscribe to my newsletter, and then give them the content. You're always going to give them the content and be like, hey, if you like this and want more, go here to get the subscriber, or to get the full newsletter. The same principle is true for any other type of growth. It's understanding kind of when and where and kind of how the user is coming to you. And sometimes that means, sending them to content on your newsletter and having a pop-up. So rather than sending them to the homepage, is just trying to, get them to subscribe straight away. Maybe the context that makes sense for that experience is to send them to a post and then, give them the opportunity either to do that. The other option is gating stuff. So if you have really, really valuable content that people are willing to kind of pay for by subscribing, rather than sending them to a sign-up page like this, you could send them to content, but then have your content gated So they have to subscribe in order to see. Lastly, social proof. We provide the ability to add testimonials to these pages. I highly recommend it. Social proof and showing other folks that are similar or of high authority are getting value is one of the most valuable ways to convince people to try your newsletter. Now, if all of this, was useful and you're interested in kind of connecting more deeply, first of all, beehiiv is the place for you. And second of all, if this was specifically, you enjoyed this experience, we have a community that comes with our paid subscription called the Hive. We have, at this point, let me check what the number is, one more subscriber. So if there's anybody who's not on beehiiv who's considering it, you could be our 100th subscriber. So it's kind of a weird milestone, but like we are one away in the community from having 3,400 users. There are like dozens of, if not hundreds of messages every day. We have topics like, AMAs, beehiiv announcements, company announcements, cross promotion, or like, recommendations, threads. We have an entire channel for design, email 101 channel, growth channels, monetization channels, celebrations channels, all kinds of stuff to basically get you kind of in that kind of world and in that kind of culture of newsletter creation. All of these users, those 3,400 users, are all active paying beehiiv users. So really, really incredible, very value dense area. Definitely, if you're on the fence, recommend the Hive as a place to join. So you're surrounded by like-minded people. With that said, I will toss it to Tony to give me any questions in the last. We'll do about 10 minutes of Q&A, or up to an hour 10. What is that? 7 more minutes. So we'll get to. And thanks for sticking around if you're still here. Tony, do we have any questions? Best practice for UTMs. Okay, yeah. So I think that there's probably better resources that are written that you could go through and understand more. But generally, the broad things are, whenever you're sharing content on social, as far as you can manage, you want your links that you're sharing to always be tagged with a UTM parameter. Anywhere you're sharing a link, honestly. Sometimes it can make the links kind of ugly, and in that case, if the link is kind of long and kind of getting unwieldy, using a link shortener is really recommended. Now, link shorteners do not work within our email platforms. They're a big flag for spam filters. So you wouldn't add like a bit.ly link or anything to your newsletter itself. But if you're sharing on social media, those are totally fine. And so, but it's really, really critically useful to be using link shorteners to ensure that you can include all of those UTM parameters. So UTM source is going to be like where the traffic is coming from. So if you're posting on Facebook, UTM source would be something like Facebook. If you're posting on TikTok, it would be TikTok. Medium is kind of the nature of that traffic. So if you're posting organically, you'd say probably UTM medium would be organic. But if it's from an ad, the link in your ad might be, PPC or CPC or paid, or one of these kind of indicators that you're paying for that traffic. If you share a link with an affiliate, or a partner, you might say the medium would be, affiliate or partner, because it's the nature of how that user is coming to you. Third, campaign is kind of a unified campaign. So if you're running an influencer campaign, you're giving these unique links to a lot of different people. So maybe the source is the influencer's name, the medium is, influencer or affiliate. The campaign could be the name of the specific campaign that you're running. And there's two other ones that are less common that we don't surface in the platform quite yet, but they're UTM term and UTM content, which are used more with specifically like Google Ads, but we can ignore those. But if you do some research, you'll find those do show up when you're doing your research. And I think I forgot to ask the question. Tony was saying, what are some best practices around UTM parameters? I'm so sorry if that was completely incoherent of like why I just started talking about UTM parameters. I blame Tony for not stopping me 5 seconds in, because I can do that and he can't defend himself because he can't be seen or heard. Are we getting landing page A/B testing feature soon? I don't have a time on it, but we definitely plan on adding it. One of the first steps to doing that is launching our web builder, which is coming on the 22nd of January, just about a week. That will be available in a beta to Max and enterprise users, and then I'm publicly launching sometime in March. But basically, this could be a fully custom, web builder experience comparable to something like, a Wix or a Webflow or, WordPress or something like that, fully customizable. If you want to see an example, our CEO, Tyler Dank at Dank Tweets, I think it is, on X, or Tyler Dank, DENK, on LinkedIn. He shared some posts today previewing what can be done with the builder by one of our associates here. So yeah, that's coming soon with any luck. I don't know at one point, but I would guess before the end of the year, which may seem a little far off because it's the beginning of the year now, but we have a lot of features that we're building out that frankly would provide a lot more of A/B testing. I don't mean that to be flip. I mean, like literally, like we're building out some really powerful features that are going to really transform people's businesses. And so, yeah, we're super excited for that. Tony, do we have any more questions? Got it. Okay, so Tony's saying there are no more questions. Have a great day. We do this for you. We do this for all of you. If there's a recording of this, which we may, I guess we probably do, but you watching this recording, you on YouTube out there in your office, home office, wherever you are, in Africa, in Florida, in Tennessee. We got Brian. I hope they're still here. Brian, Kevin, David. We do this for you. Oh, accidentally locked my screen. And we're so appreciative of your time today. You make it worth it. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll see you soon. We'll see you in the Hive. We'll see you on socials. Appreciate your time today. Best of luck.